A synthesizer is an electronic instrument that allows you to create other instruments.
It is a collection of nuts and bolts that generate sound.
Sounds that you may never have heard before. Some of them musical, some of them percussive, some of them like the sound of the wind blowing through the trees. Just can make all kinds of wonderful and scary and beautiful sounds.
You know, we went from stone knives and bearskins with synthesizers to a fine surgical tool.
So we've gone from this very large piece of hardware that was very limited in its sound capability to a very small piece of hardware that's unlimited in its capability.
We go from those which are highly unpredictable and attempt to do something which they can pretty much never do twice, to that which becomes more and more repeatable and more reliable until we flip to digital, where it becomes completely unreliable again.
Just to let you know what my dad's words are, my dad would say that synthesis is not based in synthetic, as in not real sounds, but rather synthesizing as in bringing together parts to make a whole.
It's an electronic vehicle to the soul.
Amin Bhatia is a synthesizer.
The idea for Bolero Electronica began by looking at the back of a Roland magazine article. And Roland had this ad of all the keyboards that they'd done through time. It's just a big picture of all of the keyboards they'd done. And my first thought was, it'd be neat doing a piece of music with all of that. Like using every one of them.
The idea was insane. Like, you want to go back to the earliest modulars and end up on the latest soft synths? Okay, is this a good idea? Like, first of all, the logistics of finding them, making sure they're working, making sure they're in tune, blah, 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 blah. It seemed insane.
It'd be something orchestral, it should be something everybody knew. And I started thinking about ideas of what classical music I would use.
A lot of people have been positive about it, but now and then, a few people have not. And when that's happened, I said, you know, he's sort of come back to me, we've had dinner, and he said, oh, I'm not sure about this Bolero Electronica thing, you know, I'm not 100% sure that this is a... And I said, are you nuts? This is just way cool, and it's totally you.
This one, I can see another new Bolero, no? So that's a very interesting. Not classic, not modern, but many sense included, no? So very new approach, very original.
Amin spent days in the Cantos Music Foundation using actual vintage synthesizers for the creation of early parts of Bolero.
There was a benefactor there and a hardworking crew that was interested in trying to preserve all of these legacy instruments through time. So when I walked in, it was like this playground had been built for me. It was just like, I couldn't wait to get started. I was totally blown away that someone else had thought of organizing and celebrating all of these vintage synthesizers the way I wanted to with my music.
And you could also put a pedal for the phase shifter modulation too. That's kind of weird. Of course, we were very excited at the idea because one of the reasons to have this great collection is to have it used to make new music.
I think the first half of Bolero Electronica was done, I think, with every instrument in the Cantos Foundation.
It's much more resonant, that one.
And over 3 days, we just recorded hundreds of lines from all of these different things.
It definitely changed the way I mixed it. Each one changed the palette of mix technique and mix effects and EQs and just anything that we used. I didn't want to get out of period. So he ended up bringing a bunch of tape delays and weird little reverbs and things like that. And I got a tube mixer to put a lot of the stuff through just to generate a little bit of essentially distortion, because the nature of the devices are that they weren't as technically perfect as the stuff we have now, but that really became the language of it. I mean, you know, the language of rock and roll to some extent is the distorted guitar. Without the distortion, it doesn't sound like rock and roll.
Some of the gear came from rock legends. Keith Emerson's gear was there. Patrick Moraz's double mini Moog, which we had to use. I knew Patrick from Interstellar Suite because we were both on the same label, and that's when it occurred to me, what if I could get Patrick on this thing?
The project is so interesting, and he said, you know, would you like to do a couple of stanzas of the Bolero? I'm doing the Bolero of Ravel, to celebrate 75 years of synthesis in music, and I'd like to dedicate him, of course, to Bob Moog. Very, very honored to be part of, to be part of that project. Even for 2 stanzas, man, you know, that's great.
I did not realize when I was getting into Bolero Electronica just how much work it would take. I overlooked a very important element that is common to all music that is very important, and that is orchestration. It is how you blend all these sounds together. And as I started using this synthesizer, and this thing, and something I borrowed from somewhere, and all these amazing things at the Cantos Foundation, all these things, I connected them all together, and I hit the play button. Look at all of that. And it was a mess. And I realized I can't just collect everything and hit the play button and do that. So I had to step back and I had to reorchestrate. And Steve Porcaro really helped me on that. I played him the first draft. I played the first draft for a few friends, and they came back with varying degrees of, very nice, Amin, yeah, good for you. And it was Steve that finally said, what do you think you're doing here?
So let's stop, so let's discuss this. So do you want this
We listened to every single track. We added a whole bunch of new stuff in, and we took a whole bunch of synths out. And so the last most important step in Bolero Electronica was track removal.
We all kind of have our own tricks. We have our own hot licks, so to speak. We have our discoveries we found with certain synthesizers or certain software. There's so much, there's such a vast array of stuff. No one can learn it all. And while Amin's here, I'm showing him the things I've discovered since we last met, and they're the hot licks and the tricks I've been developing since I saw him last, and I'm happy to share them with him, you know.
To hear it, and to hear it mixed, and to hear it flow so effortlessly in its rounds, the process suddenly doesn't exist. And that was the key.
It reminds me a little bit of Switched on Bach, in that it's, you know, it's taking a classical work and applying it to this very modern technology.
I think the kind of listener that's going to enjoy this album is going to be twofold. There's going to be the normal geeks like me that are synthesizer nuts that will look at the listing of all the gear that is listed in Bolero and go, holy crap, where did he find one of those, let alone use one and keep it in tune? But I also think, just like Interstellar, it's going to capture a whole new audience as well.
Just from a technical perspective, or even a music history perspective, would really enjoy it.
He's likely to go in any direction at any time, and all with its own validity. And Virtuality is one experience, and Bolero Electronica is another experience.
Back in the days when radio was king, it's no longer. You always heard about struggling artists who defied categorization. And thank God they did, because that's where we break new ground. Any kind of listener would love this record.
Can you make it a little louder?